Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed.
And we're going to start by approximating. Now you may want to use your perfect squares list that you created the other day. What is a perfect square that is less than 75? 64. What is the square root of 64? What number times itself is 64? 8. All right. So we know that our approximation is going to be 8 and a little bit more. So we're going to put a 9 here. What is 9 squared? 81. So this is the square root of 81. So the square root of 75 is somewhere between the square root of 64 and the square root of 81. It's also somewhere between 8 and 9. So we're going to put an 8 for our whole number. What is the distance between 64 and 75? I couldn't hear you, sorry. 11, okay. And what is the distance between 64 and 81? Well, 6 would get us to 70. 10 more would get us to 80. Plus 1 more, that's 17. So this is our approximation. 8 and 11/17. Do the simplification. I'm going to write an S and a colon. We're going to simplify. Does anyone remember the step, like the first step for simplifying? It's on the page before if you want to flip back and look. List all the factors. So we need to list all of the factors of 75. Once you have them listed, we're going to circle all of the perfect squares. So that is 1 and 25. Which is the biggest one? 25. And 25 is paired with 3. So we rewrite the square root of 75 as the square root of 25 times 3. 75 and 25 times 3 are the same number, so that's why we can rewrite it like that. Then we factor out that perfect square. So that looks like busting those square roots apart. So we get the square root of 25 times the square root of 3. What is the square root of 25? 5. So 5 times the square root of 3 is our answer. 8 is the square root of 80. What is a perfect square below the square root of 80? Okay, so we get 64, which is, what is the square root of 64? 8. We have the square root of 80. And then we're going to have 9. What is 9 squared? 81, so this is the square root of 81. What's our whole number going to be, 8 or 9? 8. And what is the distance between 64 and 80? 16. What is the distance between 64 and 81? 17. That's our approximation. What are the factors of 80? Out of all of those, which ones are perfect squares? I know one is a perfect square. What's another perfect square on the list? 16 and 4. I'm hearing those. Any other ones? Okay, and so 16 times what? 16 is the highest one, so that's 16 times 5. We're going to say the square root of 80 is equal to the square root of 16 times 5. Then we factor out the perfect square, so we're left with the square root of 16 times the square root of 5. What is the square root of 16? 4. So we get 4 times the square root of 5. Let's do the approximation first. What is a perfect square less than 288? $256? Okay, so the square root of 256. And what is the square root of 256? 16? All right. So we know that over here it's going to be 17. What is 17 squared? 289. Okay. So then what whole number goes with my square root of 288? 16. How far is 256 to 288? 32. And how far is 256 to 289? 33. That's the approximation. We're done with that one. I think with the bigger numbers, it is easier to try to find a perfect square and just kind of work this a few times to figure it out. So, we wouldn't use 1 because that's not going to help us any. Can you see any other perfect squares that you think might be a factor of 288? So like I would want to try 16 just because they're both even. And 16 times 18 is 288. I'm using my calculator, so that's how I know that, okay? So I know that 16 and 18 are both factors of 288. So let's just start there. We write the square root of 288 is equal to the square root of 16 times 18. Then we bust this apart and we say the square root of 16 times the square root of 18. What is the square root of 16? 4. So we get the square root, we get 4 times the square root of 18. Now, if you look at 18, can you find a perfect square that is a factor of 18? Our perfect squares are 1, 4, 9. 9 times what? 9 times 2. All right. So I'm going to rewrite 4 times the square root of 18 as 4 times the square root of 9 times 2. And then we bust this apart, so we keep 4 times the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. What is the square root of 9? 3. So this is 4 times 3 times the square root of 2. So what's this 4 times 3? 12. So our answer is 12 square roots of 2. 12 times the square root of 2. What is a perfect square below the square root of 200? Is there 196. So we have 100, or the square root of 196, which is what? Square root of 196 is 14. Then we have the square root of 200. So this number over here is going to be 15. What's the square root, or what is 15 squared? Sorry. 225. What whole number goes with our square root of 200? 14. Now we start working on the fraction. How far is 196 to 200? 4. And how far is 196 to 225? 29. Can anyone think of a factor of 200 that is on the perfect square list? 25. What is it? 25 times what? 25 times 8. Can anyone think of a factor of 8 that is on the perfect square list? 4. So we've got 25 times 8 times 2. So what's 25 times 4? 100. So we've got 100 times 2. Isn't 100 on the perfect square list? Yeah. So we can say the square root of 200 equals the square root of 100 times 2, because we're just rewriting the 200. Then we bust this apart into the square root of 100 times the square root of 2. What's the square root of 100? 10. So we get 10 times the square root of 2. The square root of 18. What is a perfect square below the square root of 18? 16. What is the square root of 16? 4. What's the perfect square above it? Yeah. So you get 4, and the difference between 16 and 18 is 2. Oops. And the difference between 16 and 25 is 9. So for simplifying the factors of 18, can you find a perfect square that is a factor of 18? 9. 9 times what? 9 times 2. So we're going to say the square root of 18 is the same thing as the square root of 9 times 2. Then we bust that apart into the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. What is the square root of 9? 3. So this is 3 times the square root of 2.